The galaxy was vast, its stars shining brightly, but no matter how far Kaelara's ship traveled, it couldn't escape the reality of her future. The princess of the Xerians, a species known for their beauty and wisdom, was being forced into a union with a human, a soldier no less. She hated the idea. Her ancestors had always maintained distance from the humans, considering them to be too wild, too unpredictable. The very thought of marrying one made Kaelara's heart twist in dread. Her long, elegant fingers gripped the railing of her ship's balcony as she looked out at the stars. They were her only comfort in this moment of uncertainty. The spaceship, sleek and silver, hummed softly around her, but Kaelara couldn't focus on the quiet sound. Her thoughts were far too loud, filled with images of the human she was supposed to marry. Captain Adrian Blake. He was a soldier, someone who had fought in countless battles, and he was the one her people had chosen for her. They said his courage was unmatched, his tactical mind sharp, and his ability to lead soldiers on the battlefield legendary. But all of this meant nothing to Kaelara. She had no interest in human bravery or war stories. What mattered to her was peace, diplomacy, and the safety of her people. Humans had no place in her heart, certainly not one of such a lowly station as a soldier. As her mind raced, a voice broke through her thoughts, soft and warm. "Princess Kaelara," said her trusted advisor, Elan, a tall Xerian with a stoic expression. "We've arrived." Kaelara straightened, her sharp features momentarily softening. She was finally here, the human world. It wasn't what she had expected. She had imagined something wild and chaotic, but instead, she saw a planet of stark contrasts: green hills, vast oceans, and towering cities. The humans had built a world that seemed almost peaceful in its appearance, yet Kaelara couldn't help but feel a cold shiver of unease crawl down her spine. The humans were unpredictable, and they weren't to be trusted. Elan led her through the ship's corridors and into a grand hall where she would meet the man she had been promised to. The space was filled with bright, gleaming metal and sleek, polished floors. It was all too modern, too sterile. Nothing about it felt right to Kaelara. She was used to the flowing tapestries, the old stone architecture of her home world, and the deep history that resonated within the walls of Xerian castles. This ship, with its cold lights and clinical feel, only deepened her sense of dread. As the doors to the meeting hall opened, Kaelara's heart skipped a beat. There, standing tall and imposing, was Captain Adrian Blake. He was everything she had imagined. A soldier through and through. His uniform, adorned with medals and the insignia of his rank, made him look like a warrior prepared for battle. But there was something about his expression that caught Kaelara off guard. It wasn't the arrogance she had expected. His face was serious, yes, but there was no hint of pride or superiority. His blue eyes, sharp and piercing, seemed to study her with quiet curiosity. She immediately felt a rush of discomfort. Her heartbeat quickened, and she struggled to remain composed. This man was not like the others. He was not as foreign to her as she had hoped. "Princess Kaelara," Adrian said, his voice low but strong. "It's an honor to meet you." Kaelara stiffened. His tone was respectful, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was all part of a carefully crafted performance. He was playing his part as the dutiful soldier, and she was playing hers as the reluctant bride. There was no room for anything else between them, not yet at least. "Captain Blake," she replied curtly, her voice cold and detached. "I trust you're aware of the arrangement." He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Yes, Princess, I understand the political nature of our union." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Kaelara's stomach churned at the thought of what was to come. She had always believed that her life would be shaped by her decisions, but now it seemed that fate had decided otherwise. She was to marry a human soldier, and her destiny would be forever tied to someone she didn't even understand. "We have much to discuss," she said, her voice stiff, "but I do not see the need for pleasantries." Adrian's expression softened slightly, as if he was aware of the tension in the room. "Of course, I understand your reluctance, Princess. I won't force anything on you." His words were calm, but they did little to ease Kaelara's unease. There was no need for him to be so kind. She had no intention of letting her guard down. As they sat down at the table across from one another, the tension in the room only grew. Kaelara tried to focus on the task at hand, the discussions of their worlds and their alliance, but her mind kept drifting back to Adrian. He was different than what she had imagined, calmer, more composed. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something beneath his soldier's armor, something more human than she had expected. But even so, Kaelara remained resolute. She had no interest in this union. She would endure it, as she had endured many other things. Her duty to her people came first, and her personal feelings didn't matter. For now, that was all she could convince herself of. The journey had begun. For the past several hours, Kaelara found herself locked in a quiet, tense silence, sitting across from Captain Adrian Blake. The grand dining room on the ship was stark, its walls lined with polished silver and gleaming glass. But it was nothing like the warm, inviting halls of her homeworld. Everything felt foreign, cold, and unfamiliar. Captain Blake had said little since their first meeting. Despite the respectful manner he had shown her, Kaelara couldn't shake her wariness. She had never been one to let her guard down easily, and now, more than ever, she needed to keep her distance from the man she had been promised to. Her people, her family, had arranged this union as a means of securing peace with the human colonies, a peace that she didn't want, nor did she understand. "You're very quiet." Blake's voice cut through the silence. It was calm, unhurried, but there was an edge of something deeper in his words, something that Kaelara couldn't quite grasp. She looked up from her hands, which were tightly clasped together in her lap. "I have little to say." Blake nodded, slowly, as if he had expected the response. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes never leaving hers, as if trying to read her thoughts. "I understand," he said softly. "I don't expect you to open up right away, but I'd like to learn about you, Princess. About your people, your world." Kaelara's eyebrows furrowed slightly at the mention of her world. "You don't need to know about Xerian history. It's irrelevant." "I think it's very relevant," Blake replied, his tone thoughtful. "How can we work together if we don't understand each other's worlds?" Kaelara felt her chest tighten, but she managed to maintain a neutral expression. She had heard this kind of talk before. Humans had always thought they could easily bridge the gap between their worlds and others with words and promises. But the truth was, there was no real understanding between them. Not yet. Not with humans who thought more with their emotions than with logic, who fought before thinking, who were driven by personal desires rather than the greater good. At least, that was how she had always seen them. "You're trying to make me feel comfortable?" Kaelara said flatly. "But I don't need comfort. I need peace for my people." Blake's eyes narrowed, his expression serious. "And you think this marriage is the answer? I didn't ask for this any more than you did, Princess. But if it's what keeps the peace, then I'll do my part." Kaelara looked away, her gaze turning toward the window, where the stars shimmered in the distance. She didn't want to believe him. She didn't want to trust him. But his words, his sincerity, made it difficult to dismiss. It was clear that he wasn't here for some grand personal gain. He was here because, like her, he had no choice. "I didn't ask for this either," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "But I have no choice either." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Kaylara had never felt so small before, like a pawn in a game that she didn't understand. She was the princess of the Xerians, and yet here she was, being married off to a human soldier. It was madness. A soft sigh escaped her lips, and Blake, sensing her discomfort, changed the topic. "Tell me about Xerian culture," he asked. "What makes your people different from ours?" Kaylara looked at him, her eyes guarded. She wasn't sure if she should indulge him, but there was something about the way he asked the question that made her hesitate. It wasn't the usual demand for knowledge. There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Something about it felt different. "We value intellect," she said slowly, "and history. Our cities are ancient, our people wise, and we believe in the strength of the mind, not just physical might." She paused, wondering if Blake could even understand what that meant. "We also believe in the power of peace and diplomacy. Conflict for us is something to avoid, not seek." Blake nodded, as though he were digesting her words. His gaze was steady, thoughtful. "I can see that," he replied, his voice low. "I know humans have a reputation for being warriors, for being quick to fight, but we also have a deep respect for our history. Our past, our stories, help us understand who we are. It's not just about strength, it's about what we stand for." Kaylara studied him for a moment, surprised by the sincerity in his eyes. She had expected him to dismiss her people's culture, to mock the idea that intellect could hold more value than strength. But here he was, listening, understanding. "I didn't expect you to be like this," she admitted, her voice softer, now though her tone remained wary. "I thought you'd be different." "I am different," Blake replied with a slight smile. "And I think you are, too." A long silence stretched between them, but it was no longer uncomfortable. Kaylara felt her defenses begin to slip, just slightly, as Blake's calm presence seemed to disarm her. She hated that she was letting him in even a little. "So," Blake said after a while, breaking the silence, "how do you feel about all of this?" Kaylara blinked, taken off guard by the question. She hadn't expected him to ask. Most people didn't care about her true feelings. Not in matters like this. "I don't want this union," she said plainly, the words feeling heavy on her tongue. "But I will do what I must for my people." Blake's expression softened, but he didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood up from his seat and walked over to the large window, looking out at the stars. He was quiet for a moment, deep in thought, before he turned back to her. "I understand," he said quietly. "But maybe we don't have to be enemies in all of this. Maybe we can find a way to make it work, even if it's hard." Kaylara was silent for a long moment, unsure of what to say. She wasn't ready to admit it, but part of her, just a small part, wondered if there was truth in his words. Was it possible? Could this union be more than just a political arrangement? Could it lead to something more, something she couldn't yet understand? "Maybe," she finally whispered. "Maybe." And with that simple word, something shifted in the air between them. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was something else, a possibility. The days aboard the ship were becoming more routine. Kaylara spent her time in her quarters, observing the stars through the large windows, while Captain Adrian Blake seemed to be busy with various military duties. The awkwardness between them was slowly fading, though Kaylara couldn't bring herself to fully trust him. Not yet. Blake had been kind, respectful, but he was still human. Still the soldier she had dreaded meeting. His calm demeanor didn't change the fact that he was not from her world, and his ways were still a mystery to her. She told herself that it didn't matter. She had her duty to her people, and this marriage, this union, was part of that duty. She had to make the best of it, no matter how unsettling it felt. But as the journey continued, an unexpected challenge arose. The ship was suddenly jolted by a violent shake, sending Kailara stumbling as alarms blared throughout the vessel. She steadied herself, her heart pounding in her chest. The ship's lights flickered, and the crew scrambled to their stations. "What's happening?" Kailara called to Elan, who rushed into her quarters with a look of urgency on his face. "Pirates," Elan said, his voice tight. "They've boarded the ship. We need to prepare." Kailara's pulse quickened. Pirates? She had never experienced anything like this before. Her people had never faced such threats. The idea of fighting for her life was foreign to her, and yet here she was, trapped aboard a ship with pirates attacking. "Where's Blake?" she asked, her voice rising with concern. Elan didn't answer immediately, and Kailara knew why. Blake was a soldier, yes, but this was a battle unlike any he had fought before. He wasn't on his home turf, and Kailara wondered how well he would handle this. Before she could voice her concerns, the door to her quarters burst open, and there stood Blake, his expression grim but calm. He looked like he had already suited, up for battle, his uniform replaced by tactical armor. His eyes scanned the room, quickly assessing the situation. "We need to move," Blake said, his voice firm. "Stay close to me, Princess. We'll get through this." Kailara hesitated for only a moment before nodding. The coolness of his voice reassured her, though she still felt the fear curling in her chest. She had never been in a fight before. Her people valued intellect and diplomacy, not combat. This was a world she wasn't prepared for. As they moved quickly through the corridors of the ship, Kailara could hear the sounds of shouting and the unmistakable clash of weapons in the distance. The pirates were getting closer. They must have breached the ship's defenses. Blake didn't waste time. He moved swiftly, pulling Kailara along with him. She had no choice but to follow. Her heart raced as they approached the command center where Blake's fellow soldiers had gathered to defend the ship. Kailara was not used to such chaos. The tight spaces, the frantic shouts, the flashing warning lights, everything felt foreign and out of control. Blake stopped at a control panel, barking orders to his team. He was calm, collected, as if he had been in situations like this 1,000 times before. Kailara watched, a mix of awe and fear in her eyes. How could he remain so composed in the face of danger? His world was so different from hers, yet here he was, doing what needed to be done. "Get to the weapons room," Blake instructed Kailara, snapping her out of her thoughts. "You'll be safer there." "I can't," she started, but Blake shook his head. "You're safer with us," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "Trust me." Kailara wanted to argue. She wanted to insist that she didn't need anyone's help. She was a princess after all, and her people had faced many challenges in the past. But as the sounds of the battle drew closer, she knew there was no time for pride. She nodded and followed Blake as he led her to the weapons room. The closer they got to the center of the action, the more the chaos seemed to escalate. Soldiers ran past them, weapons in hand, moving with precision. Kailara could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the danger they were all in. Once inside the weapons room, Blake quickly scanned the area, looking for something. Kailara could see the sweat on his brow, the determination in his eyes. He wasn't just fighting for the mission. He was fighting to protect everyone on board. "What now?" Kailara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Blake handed her a small weapon, a plasma pistol, light and easy to handle. "You stay here. If anyone comes through, you fire. I'll take care of the rest." Kailara looked at the weapon in her hands, the weight of it feeling strange, uncomfortable. She had never fired a weapon before. The idea of it terrified her. But Blake was right. She had to do something. She couldn't just hide in fear while others fought for their lives. She wasn't like the humans. She was a princess of the Xerians. She had to be strong. Blake seemed to sense her hesitation. He turned to her with a reassuring look. "You don't have to be a soldier to help. You just need to protect yourself." Kaylara took a deep breath and nodded. She didn't want to be weak. She wouldn't be weak. As the minutes passed, the sounds of fighting grew louder. Kaylara's grip on the weapon tightened, her palms sweaty, her heart racing. She was ready to do whatever it took to survive, to protect herself, to protect the people she was destined to lead. Suddenly, the door to the weapons room burst open, and two pirate soldiers stormed inside. Without thinking, Kaylara raised the pistol and fired. The blast hit one of the pirates square in the chest, sending him crashing to the ground. The other pirate hesitated, eyes wide in shock. Blake appeared in the doorway just in time, quickly neutralizing the second pirate with swift, precise movements. Kaylara watched, her heart still pounding, as he dispatched the intruder with ease. "Good shot," Blake said, his voice filled with a rare hint of approval. "You did great." Kaylara looked at him, her breath still heavy. She hadn't expected it to be so easy. In fact, it felt almost natural. It was strange how the fear that had overwhelmed her moments ago seemed to vanish in an instant. I didn't expect that," she admitted, still processing what had just happened. Blake smiled, his expression softening for a moment. "Sometimes you surprise yourself." As they cleared the room of any remaining threats, Kaylara found herself thinking about the man who had guided her through this ordeal. Adrian Blake was more than just a soldier. He was a protector, a warrior who fought for others no matter the cost. And for the first time since meeting him, Kaylara began to understand that there was more to him than she had originally believed. The ship's atmosphere slowly returned to normal after the pirate attack. The crew went about their duties, patching up damage and making sure everything was in place. The hum of the ship's engines seemed louder than before, like a constant reminder of the danger they had just faced. Kaylara had always believed that her people, the Xerians, were the epitome of strength and intelligence. They were wise, patient, and highly skilled in diplomacy. The idea of fighting, let alone surviving, a battle was not something they were accustomed to. But in that brief moment when she had fired the weapon and protected herself, Kaylara had felt something stir inside her. She had acted instinctively, and in doing so had felt something she had never expected: empowerment. After the chaos had subsided, she found herself walking the corridors of the ship, her mind still replaying the events. She hadn't realized how much she had depended on the people around her until now. Blake had saved her, but in a way she had saved herself as well. It was as if a shift had occurred, a quiet change in how she viewed her own strength and how she viewed Blake. Her thoughts were interrupted when she found herself in the observation room once again, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space was always humbling, but today it felt different. The endless sea of stars reminded her of how much she still had to learn about the universe, about herself, and about the humans, who had once seemed so foreign to her. Blake appeared in the doorway, his familiar calm presence settling the tension in her chest. He had always been a figure of stability, but today, something about him seemed different as well. "I thought I'd find you here," Blake said, his voice carrying that steady confidence she had come to recognize. He stepped closer, standing next to her. Kaylara didn't look at him right away, instead continuing to gaze at the stars. "I never thought I'd find myself here," she said quietly, almost to herself. Blake didn't push her to elaborate. He stood beside her in silence, his gaze also drifting toward the stars. It was moments like this that made Kaylara realize how little she actually knew about this human. Despite their shared moments of tension and danger, she still had so many questions. Who was Adrian Blake, really? What had brought him to this point in his life? It's strange, isn't it? Blake spoke up after a long moment. How we're all just tiny specks in this vast universe, yet we think we matter so much. Kalara turned toward him, a little surprised by his words. They were so thoughtful. She had never expected a soldier to think this way. "You're right," she said slowly, still unsure of where this conversation was going. "I've spent my whole life believing that my people were the center of everything. We valued intellect and peace, believing that we had everything figured out. But in reality, we're just a small part of something much bigger." Blake nodded, his eyes never leaving the stars. "The universe doesn't care about our status or how important we think we are. It just is." The simplicity of his words struck Kalara. He had a way of cutting through the complexity of life, reducing it to something almost peaceful. "Why are you here, Blake?" Kalara asked before she could stop herself. "Why are you so willing to help, even when this union was forced on you?" Blake's expression softened, but he didn't seem surprised by the question. "I didn't choose this, just like you didn't. But that doesn't mean I can't make the best of it. I came to this mission because I believe in protecting people. I believe in peace, even if it's hard to achieve." Kalara blinked, processing his words. "You believe in peace?" He turned to face her fully now, meeting her gaze. "Yes. Not just in the battles we fight, but in how we treat each other. I've seen a lot in my time as a soldier, Kalara. And I've seen how destructive war can be, but I've also seen how kindness and understanding can heal wounds that war can never touch. I guess I'm here because I believe there's more to life than just fighting." His words resonated deeply with her, more than she could admit. She had grown up thinking that peace was something to be achieved only through strength, only through the willingness to fight and defend. But here was Blake, a soldier, telling her that peace could also be found in understanding, in compassion, in simply treating others with respect. She didn't respond immediately, but something in her shifted. She had always been so certain about everything, her duty, her people's ways, the future. But now she was beginning to question everything. Was there another way to achieve peace besides through her people's calculated intellectual approach? Could it be possible that Blake was right? Could peace come from something as simple as kindness? The silence between them stretched on, but it wasn't uncomfortable. They were just two people, standing side by side trying to understand a universe that was far bigger than either of them. "Do you really think we can make this union work?" Kalara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Despite everything?" Blake glanced at her, his expression calm but sincere. "I think we can, Kalara. But it's not just about what we think. It's about what we do. Actions speak louder than words. And if we want to make peace, we have to be willing to put in the effort." Kalara let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. She had always believed that peace came from control, from holding everything together through force and diplomacy. But now she realized that perhaps peace also came from vulnerability, from the willingness to change, to listen, to grow together. She looked at Blake, really looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see just a soldier. She saw a person, someone who cared about the world and the people around him. It wasn't something she had expected from him, but it was something she was beginning to understand. "I think I'm starting to see that," she said quietly. Blake smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Good, because we're in this together, whether we like it or not." For a moment, there was no tension between them, no doubt, no fear. Just two people, standing together in the quiet of the universe, both unsure of what the future held, but willing to face it side by side. The days following the pirate attack seemed quieter, but in many ways Kalara couldn't shake the tension that lingered. She had fought alongside Blake, and the experience had left her with a sense of something she hadn't expected: admiration. She had always thought of humans as loud, impulsive creatures, driven by emotion and too quick to act. But Blake was different. He wasn't just a soldier who fought for the sake of war. He was someone who thought carefully, someone who believed in protecting those he cared about. Every time she saw him, whether it was during brief, quiet moments or when he was leading his team, Kaylara couldn't help but feel something shift inside her. It was as if she were seeing him for the first time, not just as a soldier, but as a person. But still, there was a wall between them, one that Kaylara couldn't tear down so easily. She didn't want to feel this way. She didn't want to admit that she was beginning to care, that her heart raced a little faster every time Blake looked at her. She had a duty to her people, to her world. This marriage, this union, was political, nothing more. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the walls between them weren't as strong as they once seemed. The evening after another long day of travel, Blake invited Kaylara to join him in the observation room. She hesitated at first, unsure of what the invitation meant, but curiosity got the best of her. Perhaps it was the growing sense of camaraderie between them, or perhaps it was simply the need to understand this man who had come into her life so unexpectedly. When she arrived, Blake was already standing by the window, his hands resting lightly on the railing as he gazed out at the stars. Kaylara stood a few paces away, not quite sure how to act around him anymore. Things were different. Now, she could feel it, even in the air between them. "You're quiet tonight," Blake said without turning to her. "Something on your mind?" Kaylara didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer, her eyes following his gaze to the stars outside. They were the same stars that had been there when she first boarded the ship. But tonight, they seemed different. Larger, somehow. She felt small in comparison, but there was a certain comfort in the vastness of space. It was a reminder that, no matter how complicated their lives had become, the universe was still as it always had been. "Are you sure this is the right path?" Kaylara asked finally, her voice quiet. Blake turned to look at her, his eyes thoughtful. "What do you mean?" She glanced at him, unsure of how to phrase her thoughts. "The union, the peace between our people. I've spent my whole life thinking I had to follow a certain path. My people value control and intellect. We avoid conflict at all costs, but I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if that's enough, if that's all there is." Blake's expression softened. He took a small step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're not alone in this, Kaylara. I know this isn't what you planned. It's not what I planned either. But I believe we can make this work. I believe we can create something new, together. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Kaylara swallowed, her emotions swirling in a way she couldn't control. She hadn't expected him to answer like that. She hadn't expected him to be so sure. "I don't want to disappoint my people," she said, the words coming out almost like a confession. "I don't want to fail them." Blake stepped even closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "You're not going to fail them, Kaylara. Sometimes doing the right thing means stepping into the unknown. It means taking a chance." She stared at him for a long moment, trying to make sense of what he was saying. How could she risk everything, her position, her duty, her people's expectations, just to follow something that felt uncertain? But deep down, she knew that she had already started walking this path, whether she liked it or not. Her heart raced as she looked up at him, wondering if he could see how conflicted she was. He must have, because his expression softened even. "More! I think," Kaylara began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think I'm afraid." Blake's gaze never wavered. He didn't look at her with pity or judgment. He simply looked at her as if he understood, because, maybe in some strange way, he did. "I understand," he said quietly. "But you're stronger than you think, Kaylara. You've already proven that." Kaylara couldn't help but feel a tug at her heart as his words sank in. She had never seen herself as strong, at least not in the way Blake seemed to see her. But she was starting to understand what he meant. Strength wasn't just about power or intellect. Sometimes it was about vulnerability. It was about admitting fear and still pushing forward. "Blake," she said, her voice filled with hesitation. "I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I can make this work, but I do know that I'm willing to try." For the first time, Kaylara saw the flicker of a real smile cross Blake's face. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. It wasn't the smile of a soldier offering a quick reassurance. It was the smile of a man who had found something real, something worth fighting for. "I'm with you, Kaylara," he said softly. "We'll figure this out together." She stood there, facing him for a long moment. The weight of the future seemed lighter somehow. For the first time in a long time, Kaylara wasn't alone in her thoughts. And for the first time, she wasn't so sure that the path she had been given was the only path she could take. The days that followed were filled with anticipation. Kaylara's thoughts seemed to swirl around the same questions. Should she trust Blake? Could she allow herself to care for him in a way that went beyond duty? The uncertainty of her situation was starting to weigh on her heavily, yet in the midst of it all, something in her had shifted. She had always believed that peace could only come through control and intellect. But Blake, with his simplicity and calm strength, had made her see that perhaps there was another way, a way built on trust, understanding, and the willingness to take risks. She wasn't sure yet what that meant for her future, but she knew. She couldn't keep pretending that everything would work out on its own. The final stretch of their journey felt like it was dragging on forever. Every day they came closer to their destination, the human colony where the marriage was to take place. It was a political event, a union that would seal the peace treaty between the Xerians and humans. But for Kaylara, it was more than just a ceremony. It was a decision, a choice that would shape the rest of her life. As the ship entered the orbit of the human colony, Kaylara stood at the observation window once more, staring out into the deep black void of space. The lights of the colony twinkled below her like tiny, distant stars. She could feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on her chest. Her duty to her people had always come first. That was the foundation of everything she had, believed in, everything she had worked for. But now her heart was pulling her in a different direction. It was a direction she hadn't expected to go, one that led straight to Blake. She didn't know if she was ready for that, but she knew that there was no turning back. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Blake's presence had become something she had started to rely on without even realizing it. Kaylara. Blake's voice was warm, but there was a hint of concern in it. "We're almost there." "I know," she replied, her voice quiet. "I've been thinking about everything, about what happens next." He stepped into the room, standing beside her at the window. For a long moment, neither of them said anything. It was as if they were both trying to understand what had brought them here. "What happens next?" Kaylara finally asked, turning to face him. "What do I do? What do we do?" Blake didn't hesitate. "We move forward, together." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Kaylara had always been afraid of moving forward, afraid of the unknown, of stepping out of the rigid structure she had spent her entire life building. But Blake's presence, his unwavering belief in her, was starting to break down the walls she had built around herself. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This isn't just about us. This is about peace, about my people's future. I can't just follow my heart. There's so much more at stake." Blake nodded, his expression serious. I understand, Kalara. But peace isn't just about treaties or alliances. It's about finding common ground, about creating something new. You don't have to carry all of that on your own. I'll be with you, every step of the way. Kalara looked at him, her eyes searching his face. There was something in his gaze, something deep, something real, that made her feel as though she wasn't alone. For the first time since the union had been arranged, Kalara felt the weight of her responsibilities lessen, just a little. I don't know if I'm ready, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can do this. Blake's hand reached out, gently taking hers. You don't have to be ready right now. You just have to be willing to try. We can face this together. For a long moment, Kalara didn't speak. She simply held his hand, feeling the steady pulse of his confidence and warmth. She had never expected to be in this position, to be standing on the edge of a decision that could change everything. But now, with Blake beside her, she didn't feel quite so alone. You've shown me a different way, she said softly, her voice full of vulnerability. A way I never thought I'd find. Blake smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. I think we're both learning from each other. You've opened my eyes to a lot, Kalara, more than I ever expected. She squeezed his hand, feeling a sense of connection with him that she had never thought possible. There was something genuine between them, something that neither of them had planned for. The union had always seemed like an obligation, a burden she had to carry. But now she was beginning to see that it could be something more, a chance for both of them to build something new. The ship's intercom crackled, breaking the moment. Princess Kalara, the voice of her advisor, Elan, came through. We're preparing to land. The ceremony will begin shortly. Kalara's heart skipped a beat. It was time. The moment had arrived. Are you ready? Blake asked, his voice soft but steady. Kalara turned to face him, the weight of everything she had learned pressing on her shoulders. But she didn't feel afraid anymore. She didn't feel like she was being forced into something. She was making a choice, one that was hers to make. I'm ready, she said, her voice firm with conviction. Let's do this. Together. Blake's smile grew wider, and for the first time, Kalara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope.